Sergeant, if you'll come up to the front for me, please, sir.
Yes, sir.
And if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do.
All right, Sergeant, if you'll come right around this way for me, please, sir. And you can adjust that microphone as you need. Just speak loudly into it. Ms. Wolfson.
Good afternoon, Sergeant. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Sergeant Brian J. Shore, last name is spelled S-H-O-R-E.
Sergeant Shore, where do you currently work?
I work the midnight shift on the south side of Jacksonville, Zone 3.
Is that with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, ma'am.
And Sergeant Shore, how long have you been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
18 years.
And your current position is Sergeant?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long have you been a Sergeant within JSO?
4 or 5 years.
Now, what sort of training and coursework did you do prior to becoming a Sergeant within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Well, completed my basic certification, and since that time I've gone through training in interviews and interrogation, case and court preparation, injury and death investigations, radar certification, at scene and advanced traffic crash investigation.
Now, have you also had training, and I'm sure plenty of experience with securing scenes and things of that nature?
Yes, ma'am, I
And
have.
establishing a perimeter?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I know you stated you're assigned to Zone 3. Is that the south side of town area?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And could you actually explain to the jury what the actual parameters are of Zone 3?
Zone 3, if you start at the Jacksonville Beach city limits where it intersects with Beach Boulevard, you draw a line straight down the middle of Beach Boulevard all the way until you hit the river. Everything south of that line is, to the St. Johns County line, is Zone 3.
Sergeant, I'd like to turn your attention to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working that night on the midnight shift as a sergeant?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Now, during your shifts, did you hear a call come out in regards to a shooting at the Gate gas station at Southside Boulevard and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where were you when you first heard that call come out?
I was at the Shell station at I-95 and Bay Meadows Road.
Were you with any other law enforcement agents at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Who else were you with?
Sergeant Phil Christie.
And what zone and shift, I guess, is Sergeant Christie assigned to?
Sergeant Christie at that time was still assigned to the midnight shift. He supervised one squad of officers, and I supervised the other squad of officers.
Now, could you tell the jury how many officers are in a squad, specifically for the midnight shift?
Each of those squads is 10 officers.
So there were a total of 20 officers working over Zone 3 during the midnight shift?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what did you and Sergeant Christie do when you heard this call come out over the radio?
Both of us immediately left the Shell station in our patrol vehicles with the lights and siren activated and proceeded to the Gate station.
And you all were in separate vehicles?
That's correct.
Approximately what time did you arrive on scene?
Would have been within 2 to 3 minutes of the call going out, but no more than 5 minutes.
Sergeant Christie, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 2. Does State's Exhibit 2 look familiar to you?
Sergeant Shore.
Or, excuse me, Sergeant Shore. Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Sergeant Shore, using State's Exhibit 2, can you explain to the jury what path you took to get back to the Gate gas station from where you and Sergeant Christie were?
From I-95 and Bay Meadows Road, we proceeded eastbound on Bay Meadows Road till we reached Southside Boulevard. Once we reached the intersection of Southside Boulevard, we turned north on Southside Boulevard and then made an immediate right to enter into the parking lot, the entrance that runs between the Gate gas station and the strip mall.
Okay, and so was this the entrance you used, or did you use the entrance farther down?
It would be the entrance that's got the car sitting in the middle of it,
Okay.
right on the
Could
left.
you circle that for the jury? You should be able to touch on the screen. And so that's then the entrance that you and Sergeant Christie
Yes, ma'am.
used? Okay. And now, Sergeant Shore, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 1, which should be an overhead view of, I believe, a similar photograph of what we were just looking at.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you, in drawing on that photograph, can you show the jury where you actually drove when you pulled into that entrance?
Once we pulled through the entrance, we parked in this area right here.
And could you explain for the jury why you parked your car right there?
So we could cut off any vehicle access in and out of the Gate station parking lot.
Now, when you arrived on scene, were other law enforcement personnel already on scene?
Yes, ma'am, there were.
Do you remember whether or not members of the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Unit was already on scene?
Not at that time, but they arrived momentarily, I mean, within a minute or two after we did.
Now, where, in looking at State's Exhibit 1, your car was parked right there. Where was Sergeant Christie's car parked?
Sergeant Christie's was parked right next to mine. We were both blocking the entrance there.
Okay. Now, once you arrived on scene and parked your car where you circled for the jury, what did you and Sergeant Christie do?
Proceeded up into the parking lot area of the gate station, and at that point there was a red Dodge Durango that was parked in one of the parking spaces.
And I'm showing you State's Exhibit 8. Is that the red Dodge Durango that you were just referring to?
It appears to be, yes, ma'am.
And is this in the same position where the vehicle was parked when you walked up on scene?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Now, when you arrived on scene, was the scene still active?
Yes, ma'am, it
And
was.
could you explain to the jury what an active crime scene is?
We still had people that were tending to injured parties there, trying to determine who was involved, who was witnesses, and needed to remain at the scene, and exclude anybody that wasn't pertinent to the investigation out of that area.
Now, even though the scene was still active, was there still some sort of control over who had access to the crime scene and who could come and go?
Yes, ma'am, there was.
And how is that done?
We had the entrances to the parking lot blocked off, and we also had officers that were controlling what we had initially an inner perimeter, which was the immediate crime scene area. And then as officers arrived, we started completely cutting off access to the gate station area.
And could you explain to the jury what actually it means to set up a perimeter?
Initially, we determined what as far as evidence, and like I said, we set up an inner perimeter, which was the area immediately around the crime scene, and then we expanded that to control all access to that location and make sure that any people that aren't allowed to enter into the area that could contaminate the scene, and any people that are in there that are pertinent to the investigation are segregated away.
And is that done then with both crime scene tape as well as actual police officers who line the perimeter?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Now, in looking at State's Exhibit 1, can you circle, I know it's off to the side, but can you circle where the inner perimeter was initially established?
The inner perimeter was right up along the front of the business there.
Okay, and then I know you stated at some point it was expanded
Yes, ma'am.
to an outer perimeter. Could you now show, using that same photograph, where the outer perimeter was expanded to?
The outer perimeter, we controlled access here, controlled access back here, and over, it's just off the screen here, but to the right side of the screen.
Does State's Exhibit 2 help you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you could just do the outer perimeter again using State's Exhibit 2.
Had a vehicle that was securing the entrance here, and they also put crime scene tape up to secure there. Cut off access, because there's a road that runs back behind the gate station. Cut off access there, and cut off access here. So basically, by the time we were done, we had this whole corner all segregated off and had it totally under control.
Now, Sergeant, while you were on scene, did members of the homicide detectives team eventually arrive on scene at this gate gas station?
Yes, ma'am, they did.
And once they arrived on scene, then were they the ones who were in control of the crime scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that end your involvement in this case?
I remained at the scene. I still had some other tasks to take care of.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Abel?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Sergeant.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Now, you said that you arrived somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am, somewhere in that
after
time
dispatch.
frame.
Okay. And it was at that point that you all started setting up the perimeter, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Initially, it was just the interior perimeter?
The immediate thing that we did was secure the inner perimeter, and then once we had that under control and had all the evidence identified in there that we needed to secure, then we expanded it to control the entire area of the gate gas station.
Okay, so there was quite a bit of time then that went between the time that the inner perimeter was established and the outer perimeter.
Not an excessive period of time.
Well, how much time?
Between 10, 15, 20 minutes to the outside before the entire corner was controlled.
Okay, so about 10, 15, anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes before you all had everything blocked off?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's 10, 20 minutes after you arrived?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So but you don't know, obviously, what happened prior to your arrival with the red SUV?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Okay, you don't know where it went or where it drove to, where it stopped?
The only thing I know was the radio transmissions that pertain to it.
Okay. And you, sir, didn't witness whether anyone got out of that SUV, where they drove to or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you. Ms. Wolfson, any other questions of the sergeant? May he be excused? Ms. Abel, may he be excused?
Yes, sir, you may.
Thank you, Sergeant. Next witness.
State next call is Officer Forrester.
Officer Forrester. Officer, if you'll come to the front for me, please, sir. And if you'll raise your right hand, the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, sir, if you'll come right around this way for me. And you can adjust that microphone if you need to. Just speak loudly into it. Ms. Wolfson.
Good afternoon, officer. Could you please state your name and spell it for the record?
Yes. Michael C. Forster. My last name is spelled Forster.
Officer Forrester, are you currently employed?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and where are you currently employed?
I am employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
I've been with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office 30 years.
And what is your current assignment within the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
I am a bailiff at the courthouse.
And how long have you been working as a bailiff in the courthouse?
Approximately 9 months.
And what were you doing prior to becoming a bailiff in the courthouse?
Prior to being a bailiff, I was a Jacksonville police officer.
Did you work patrol?
Yes.
And how long were you working as a patrol officer for?
Approximately 29 years.
Now, prior to becoming a bailiff, what was the last zone that you were assigned to?
I was assigned to Zone 3.
Is that in the south side area?
That is correct.
Now, Officer Forrester, I'd like to turn your attention back to November 23rd of 2012. Were you working on that particular day as a patrol officer assigned to Zone 3?
Yes, I was.
And do you remember what shift you were working back then?
Well, yes, Watch 6.
And what hours are Watch 6?
From 6:30 to 5:55 a.m.
So it's 6:30 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
5:55 a.m.? Now, during your shift, did you hear a call come out over the radio about a shooting that happened at the corner of Southside and Bay Meadows Road?
Yes, I did.
And do you remember where you were when you heard this call come out?
Not exactly.
What did you do once you heard this call come out?
I immediately put on my blue lights and sirens, and I responded to the scene.
And was that in your marked patrol car?
Yes, in my marked police car.
Now, do you remember what time it was that you arrived on scene?
No, ma'am.
When you got on scene, where did you first go?
I drove up to the scene and positioned my car near the southeast exit/entrance on Bay Meadows Road.
Officer Forrester, in front of you should be State's Exhibit 2 on the computer screen. Do you see that in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
And could you show the jury on State's Exhibit 2 where you positioned your vehicle?
Approximately right here.
If you touched it, it will.
If you push your finger on there and push on it, there you go. Maybe a bigger mark, perhaps.
There you go. That red mark, is that where you position your vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you arrived on scene, officer, were other officers already there?
Yes.
And were you instructed then to place your car there as part of the outer perimeter?
Yes, I was.
Now, did you also put up crime scene tape over there?
Yes, I put up the crime scene tape.
And where did you put up the crime scene tape?
I was closing off the exit/entrance with the crime scene so no one could enter the parking lot.
Okay, and then did you control then who could come in and go out of the
Yes.
crime scene at that point in time? And who was allowed to enter the crime scene while you were there?
Detectives.
And did you have any other involvement in this case other than blocking off that entrance?
No, ma'am, I had no other involvement.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Any questions?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon.
Would it be correct to say that it took you about 5 minutes to arrive to the scene?
Approximately.
Approximately, okay. And from the time that this shooting occurred to the time that you arrived on the scene, you can't fill in any details in that time, right?
That's correct.
Okay. I know that you put up the perimeter on the, is that Bay Meadows area?
Yes, that's correct.
And there was also a perimeter set up on the opposite side, correct?
That's correct.
That encompassed the gate gas station?
Yes.
But there was no perimeter set or tape put up to block off the adjacent plaza, isn't that correct?
That I don't know.
Officer Forster, when, as a part of your investigation in this case or your involvement, did your sergeant or any other detectives ever ask you to participate or help in searching the gate gas station or the adjacent plaza?
No, they didn't ask me to do that.
Dumpsters, bushes, any place?
No.
Sustained.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I have, Your Honor. He may be excused.
Ms. Wolfson, any questions, or may he be excused? Thank you, officer, you're excused.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you an afternoon, well, I guess it'd be another afternoon break since we started this afternoon. It's almost 4:20. We'll resume at 25 minutes of 5. That'll give you a little bit more than 15-minute break. So again, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Don't let anybody discuss the case in your presence. See you back in about 18 or so minutes. We'll ask your questions. That person will read the answers, and then Ms. Abel, you'll do the cross.
I will, Your Honor.
And then was there redirect?
No, Your Honor, there was just a direct in the cross, but I would ask Your Honor to inquire of the defendant that he is okay with the portions of the cross-examination that were taken out.
Okay.
And I was going to ask the same, Your Honor.
Right. Do you understand that, Mr. Dunn? Under the rules, you can, if somebody's unavailable, you can use prior testimony, which is where we are on this. And I know you might not have had too much time to, why don't you raise your right, you don't have to stand up, just raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I probably ought to remember to do that every day, like I did the last time, but today's day one. Anyway, you understand that a witness can be called, so to speak, and through prior sworn testimony if they're unavailable.
I agree. Recently, you're kind of aware of that.
Okay. And so, and you may not have had too much time, but are you okay with what's going to be read, and as far as the direct and the answers, and then the cross that Ms. Abel will read and the answers? I know they've pared it down a little bit, but are you okay with the redactions? I'm sorry.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, just the one last thing, is just so the court's aware, and I believe defense counsel had since they read through the transcript, but there is an exhibit that was shown to Ms. Harris, and that's State's Exhibit 24, so we'll of course
Okay.
show that to this witness as well.
All right. And I guess we can just have this witness, or this person, whoever it is, just take the stand, and then I'll
Judge, if I can chime in, I think I know where you're headed. There's a very brief instruction about prior testimony, and I've emailed that to Your Honor.
Okay, I'll find it.
It's 301.1A, and I've reviewed that with Ms. Hannity, and she has no objection to that. It's
Okay,
just-
which reads, members of the jury, the sworn testimony of Aaliyah Harris given before trial will now be presented. You are to consider and weigh this testimony as you would any other evidence in the case. Now, I'll
That's
just-
right, Your Honor. I reviewed that, and I would agree that that's an appropriate instruction.
Okay,
Your Honor, would you like us to bring Ms. Wood?
might as well.
Thanks.
And by the way, that's it then for the day.
Yes, sir.
We don't have anybody else.
Not-
We've run out of witnesses.
Yeah, that's right.
Ma'am, if you'll come on up and right over here in the witness chair, just have a seat. And I assume they've gone over with you how this will work.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you'll just kind of pretend.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and just read it verbatim. All right, bring the jurors on in.
Jurors entering the courtroom.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate your indulgence. You can have a seat. Obviously, that was more than 18 minutes. There's, I guess, good news and bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. The good news is we're moving along quicker than we thought. The bad news is we've pretty well run out of witnesses for the day, except for one more that we're about to do now. And in actuality, what we're going to do now is the sworn testimony of Aaliyah Harris, given before trial, will now be presented. You are to consider and weigh this testimony as you would any other evidence in the case. This is not Ms. Harris. Ms. Harris is unavailable, so this prior testimony will be read in essence, but Ms. Wolfson will read the questions. This nice lady will read the answers. Ms. Abel will then do the cross-examination, and then the answers will be also read. And then, because we've run out of witnesses, that'll be it for today. So I'll talk to you a little bit more after this about that. Ms. Wolfson.
Please state your name for the jury.
Aaliyah Harris,
How old are you, Ms. Harris?
19 years old.
And where do you currently live?
Boca Raton.
Are you in school down there?
Yes, ma'am.
And where do you go to school?
Florida Atlantic University.
What year are you at Florida Atlantic University?
My freshman year.
Where did you graduate from high school?
Wolfson High School.
And could you tell the jury what year you graduated?
2013, June.
Now, Ms. Harris, do you know someone by the name of Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you first meet Jordan Davis?
August 2012.
And where did you meet him?
At school.
Could you tell the jury what your relationship was like with Jordan Davis?
We had a good, friendly relationship at first, and then we started dating.
Now, during this time, Ms. Harris, how often would you see him?
Every day.
Now, during this time, and that's the fall of 2012, were you also working?
Yes, ma'am.
And where were you working?
Urban Outfitters at the town center.
Ms. Harris, how often would you work during this time?
Maybe a couple times a week.
Now, Ms. Harris, I'd like to turn your attention to November 23rd of 2012. That's the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working that day?
Yes, I was.
And was that at Urban Outfitters?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember what time you got to work?
About 5 o'clock p.m.
And what time were you working until?
About 2 o'clock a.m.
Do you remember what time the store actually closed?
11 o'clock p.m.
Okay, while you were working at Urban Outfitters, did you ever see Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where were you when you saw him?
At work.
Did Jordan Davis come in the store?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he by himself when he came into the store?
No, ma'am.
Who else was with him?
2 other friends, Tevin and Leland.
Now, had you ever met Leland before?
Yes, ma'am.
When had you first met Leland?
At school.
Was that also in Wolfson High School?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, had you ever met Tevin before?
Yes, ma'am.
When had you met Tevin?
At high school.
Now, do you remember whether or not anyone else was with them that day?
No, ma'am.
When Jordan Davis came into the store, what was his demeanor like?
He was in good spirits. He was happy.
Did you know he was coming into the store?
No, ma'am.
Was it a surprise?
Yes.
Ms. Harris, did you get to talk to Jordan Davis when he came into the store?
Yes, ma'am. Briefly.
Did you all have any sort of fight or argument at that point in time?
No, ma'am.
And how long did you get to speak with him for?
A couple of minutes.
When he left, were you all on good terms?
Yes, ma'am.
What time did he leave the store?
I'm not sure exactly what time, but I know it was dark outside.
And after he left the store, Ms. Harris, did you ever speak with Jordan Davis again?
Not ever.
Now, Ms. Harris, I believe if you look on your screen, I'm showing you what's previously been stipulated and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 24.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Harris, is that a photograph of Jordan Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Ms. Abel?
Your Honor. Ms. Harris, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
So when you started school in September of 2012, you had just met him after you started school?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you started dating?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, did you start dating in October, November? When did you start dating?
At the end of September.
Were you dating him the entire time?
Yes, sir.
And you'd characterize your relationship with Mr. Davis as a solid relationship, correct?
Yes, sir.
You guys talked every day,
Yes, sir.
exclusively dating each other?
Yes, sir.
And he came to see you that night because you are his steady girlfriend, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this was in November of 2012, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it gets dark about 5:30 at night?
Yes, sir.
On that, do you know he was carrying a tactical, excuse me, let me start over. Do you know he was carrying a tactical knife that night in his pocket?
No, sir.
And you said you talked to Jordan Davis every day?
Yes, sir.
And you even had, well, did you hang out with him every day?
Yes, sir.
Did he tell you where he was going after he left the store?
No, sir, he did not.
Did you know where he was going?
No, sir.
When you got off work, what time did you get off work?
About 2:00 a.m.
Okay.
the next morning.
When you got off work, did you ever call Jordan Davis?
No, sir.
Did you ever text him?
No, sir.
When you woke up, did you call him?
No, sir.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. You can resume your seat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, then that will conclude the testimony for today. Again, when you go back to the hotel, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Don't discuss the case with anybody else. Don't let anybody approach you about it. I forgot to ask you this morning, as far as last night and this morning before you got with the sheriff's office personnel, we stayed in our little vacuum and didn't have any incidents of seeing things we shouldn't, reading things we shouldn't, having somebody speak to us as though they should not. Everybody still good there? Okay, let the record reflect everybody said yes and nodded their head. So we will let you go. The bailiffs will get you collected and get you transported back to your hotel. We will resume tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And I think other than that, unless there's anything from council, Ms. Hanania?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Guy? Other than that, that'll do it. We'll watch over your notes for you while through the night. And I thank you all for your time and attention today, and we'll look forward to seeing you first thing tomorrow morning. Have a great evening.